Hello and welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer, endurance enthusiast or simply have an interest in sport, you have come to the right place for inspiration, encouragement, motivation and, as always, plenty of entertainment. Who else is glued to the Olympics? I just can't get enough of the coverage. I literally have it on from early morning to late at night, and with so many nail-biting moments, it's been a hugely exciting game so far. Mona McSharry from Sligo winning bronze for Ireland on Monday night was simply superb. And Daniel Whiffen winning gold for Ireland, setting a new Olympic record in the pool in the process last night, was just incredible. I have to tell you, I was totes emosh watching the medal ceremonies. The Irish athletes are doing us so proud across the board, and with lots more exciting action to come over the coming days, it's just brilliant. And then of course we have the Paralympics taking centre stage. It's all so exciting. And speaking of exciting, what a morning of triathlon we have just witnessed. After all the drama over the past few days regarding the swim, we finally got to see an incredible lineup of triathletes race in Paris. What a win for the two new Olympic champions, Cassandra Beaugrand from France, who looked like she took every inch of the home support and carried it with her all the way to the finish line, and the UK's Alex Yee. What a win! What a run! A thrilling end to the men's race. I can tell you I have total FOMO here in Galway this morning, and I might just have to look up some flights to head to France for the mixed relay due to take place on Friday. Closer to home, away from triathlon and the Olympics, there were plenty of nail-biting moments for Galway and Armagh GAA fans on Sunday. I was delighted to host the live screening of the All-Ireland football final in Pearse Stadium, and whilst the result didn't end up in Galway's favour, it was a super day in the stadium with a brilliant atmosphere. The Francis Thornton Galway-based swim and Native Cansincare West, the BioFreeze Irish Runner 10-mile road race in Dublin, the Galway Sports Partnership Inclusive Triathlon and Ironman 70.3 Swansea in Wales kept me busy this month with some brilliant days on the microphone. It won't be long until I'm back on the road again with the streets of Galway on August 10th, kickstarting 2 weeks of working adventures. I'm excited to announce that 2 new events for me this year at Ironman Sweden in Kalmar and at the Swiss Epic in the coming weeks. After that, the announcing and travel really ramps up for September. Thankfully, I've managed to keep up some level of consistency with my training over the past few weeks, just tipping along, enjoying swimming, biking and running with no pressure or expectation. I had a super day out of racing at the Two Provinces Triathlon in early July, and also managed to get 3 out of the 5 Galway Triathlon Club aquathlon races done over the past few weeks. The racing was so much fun and it was such a buzz. I really am enjoying being back racing and love that my training for Ironman 70.3 Majorca has provided the base to be able to take part in these short races without too much structured training or indeed planning. I had hoped to get another couple of sprint races under my belt in the coming weeks. They're looking a little less likely now, but hopefully I can replace them with something else. The big challenge, of course, will be keeping on top of my training and fitness as we progress through the rest of the season, as the next few months to the end of the year are jam-packed full of announcing adventures. Now, before we dive into this episode, here's a quick reminder of some of the discounts that might be of interest to you. If you are planning on racing abroad over the coming weeks and have yet to book your bike transport, be sure to pop over to teamtruck.eu and check out their options for your bike transportation. Use the code TTS35 to get a €35 discount on your booking. I used Team Truck for the Ironman 70.3 in Majorca and they were brilliant, so they do come very highly recommended. We also have a 10% discount on precision hydration products, thanks to George Sherwood. Pop over to the link on my Instagram bio or pop me a message for the link and the code. Finally, be sure to check out the Nuasan range. Online, using the code TTS15, you'll get 15% off your next purchase on www.nuasan.com. I switched over to the precision hydration products this year, especially to the carb and electrolyte drink and the chews, and I love both of them. Anyone who knows me knows I love the Nuasan product range, so you can be assured that these brands are top class. Now to this month's episode, which was recorded shortly after Fiona secured her national championship titles. Irish professional cyclist Fiona Mangan from Limerick has been blazing a trail on 2 wheels since switching her focus to cycling in 2020. The Biomedical Engineer was recently crowned both the 2024 Cycling Ireland Time Trial and Road Race Champion in front of a home crowd in Limerick in June of this year, adding to her already impressive CV of cycling results. A Gaelic footballer from a young age, she took up triathlon during her college years when she went to Atlanta on a one-year student exchange. It wasn't until the pandemic struck that a real passion for cycling was ignited, and from there she has excelled in the sport at home and abroad. From National Road Series winner in 2021 to becoming the first Irish woman to complete one of cycling's Grand Tours, La Vuelta Femenina in 2023, Fiona has truly embraced life as a professional cyclist. Using Girona as her base, she travels and races with her team Cynisca Cycling, and when the opportunity arises and time permits, she loves nothing more than to come back home to Limerick to spend time with her family and friends. Still relatively new to professional cycling, Fiona continues to go from strength to strength and has her sights firmly set on success in the sport. And with her French heritage, it is no surprise that the Tour de France is definitely on her bucket list. Now go grab a cuppa and enjoy the show. Fiona Mangan, welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast, fresh from an exceptional weekend of racing in Ireland, back on home soil, national TT champion and national road champion. Absolutely amazing. How are you?
Hi, Joanne. I'm so good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast as well. I'm really happy to be here.
And of course, you're not in Limerick at the moment. You are in Girona.
Yeah, I am. I am based here at the moment. I'm only here for 2 weeks because I leave for Belgium next week for the Belgium tour. So I'm kind of a bit of a gypsy going from one place to the next.
Are you still on a high from the racing at home 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite days ever, weeks even. To win the Nationals, the time trial was definitely more of a relief. When I won, I was okay. So my hard work has come to something and it felt really special. And then the road race was the cherry on top. That was just pure joy because I didn't really expect to win the road race at all. And yeah, it was quite overwhelming. I think afterwards I was just still in a bit of a trance or something. But yeah, it's the Nationals is always really special because you get to wear the jersey abroad. And so for a year, it kind of stands with you. Yeah, so it's always a very special race to win.
Well, there's something now I didn't know, and I don't know if our listeners will know that. So explain that to me a little bit more. So when you go to a race now, do you wear your Irish national jersey, even with your team?
Yeah, exactly. So every national champion gets to wear their full kit whenever they do any races abroad, except, of course, if you're doing Europeans or World Championships, and then you'd wear the national kit. But your team designs your own kit, and there's a specific design that they kind of have to follow. Ours, you'll see it, but it has a big shamrock in the middle. You'd have seen other riders wear it before, Lara and Ben and a few others. So yeah, so every race you do, then you get to wear it. It's kind of I would say like a step up in the peloton because you kind of gain a bit more respect amongst your peers, and that's always helpful in the bunch as well.
Does it come with extra pressure though, although you probably don't know yet because I presume you haven't raced since the Nationals?
Yeah, I think it's good pressure because you want to do the jersey justice. You want to get Ireland's, name out there and you want to do it proud. So I would actually say it's definitely positive pressure.
I like that, positive pressure.
Yeah.
We might talk a bit more about pressure and not just the pressure in your tires in a few minutes. But before we delve into life as a professional cyclist, let's go backwards a little bit because we do like to share the background of our guests with our listeners. How did you get involved in sport in the first place? Where did the passion for sport come from? And how have you ended up now on the Cynisca Cycling team as a professional cyclist?
Yeah, so I guess I started sport when I was like 8 years old. Where I'm from Kildimo in Limerick, and as you probably know, it's very well known for its hurling. But we actually got a taster of football at school, and me and my best friend at the time, we wanted to join a football club, and so we joined a club in town called Mungret, St. Paul's, and they had a really good ladies team that was growing. I loved football because where I was from in my school, there's only 5 girls in my class. So it was really nice to go into town and actually play sport with like a bigger bunch of girls. So I played football until I was 18. I was on the Limerick team as well. And eventually when I got to college, I guess like many of us, I kind of wanted to focus more on college and I couldn't travel down for matches and things like that. So yeah, I really made the most of my college experience, and I definitely spent the first year probably outside of college in town more than in college. But
and there was no football in your hand, I'd say.
No, there's definitely no football. But there was like that's when I started doing like spinning classes and things like that. And then I joined the Galway Tri Club eventually just after college. So yeah, I guess college, I kind of transitioned more into triathlon. My dad would have done triathlon for a number of years. So I was kind of aware of what the sport was, but it wasn't until I joined my own club and kind of got into it myself is when I kind of started doing that. And I actually went to America in my third year during my Erasmus, or like kind of school exchange. And that's when I kind of did more triathlon there, because it was actually a way of traveling every weekend to different places around Georgia. So it was a nice way of getting to see the area and at the same time making new friends and stuff. So I came back to Ireland then and I graduated, and yeah, like everyone, you start kind of making money so I could afford my own things, because I guess that's the thing with sometimes with endurance sport is the equipment and things that can be expensive. So it wasn't until I started working that I could afford to buy my own things. And so I really liked triathlon. It was a nice way of traveling around Ireland as well. And then COVID happened and I had a running injury and the pools were closed. So I just focused more on cycling. And I actually did a lot of cross country cycling with some of the guys from home in Limerick. So that was really nice. And we just went cycling in lots of different places around Limerick. And yeah, and then Greenmount Cycling kind of took me under their wing, their club in Limerick. And the guys there have so much experience. And not only that, is they really like bringing in new riders on and teaching them how to ride. So they taught me everything about it. They taught me especially skills and bunch skills. And yeah, so I think that's where it went from there. And then at the end of 2020, I did my first race. First race was GP Lucan, and then my second race was the National Championships. That's when I met a lot of other girls that were cycling full time. And then you see the likes of like Alice and Lara and a couple of others that are doing it full time. And you're kind of, oh, these girls are from Ireland and they're cycling their bikes professionally. And yeah, it's really cool. At this point, I never really thought that I would ever do professional cycling. It was a hobby. I loved my work, and that was my primary passion. And me and my boyfriend decided to go remote working for 2 weeks in Spain in the start of 2021. And that's when I just brought over my bike and just thought, we'd go on nice training rides and stuff. But actually, COVID started to get worse in Ireland. And so we actually stayed in Spain for a lot longer than planned. And I decided to join a local club team in Spain and just immersed myself in Spanish racing, which the level is a lot higher than back home in Ireland. You have bunches of 100 girls showing up at these like club races. So you're really thrown into the deep end. And it's great because the guys from home, my coaches, Vinny and Alan, would be really helpful. I'd analyze every race with them and they would go through all the things that I need to improve on. And that was really, really important, because I think a lot of girls sometimes, or people come into the sport sort of focus more on the fitness side of things, whereas they were always more about, well, tactically, what are you doing? And are you saving energy? And so from the get-go, I always had that kind of mindset with cycling. And I was like, okay, the fitness will come eventually, And then it was like August 2021. I went to Belgium to do what they call kermesses. So it was actually my boyfriend that told me to go out. And he said that, Belgium is like the home of cycling. And so I went out and I rented a car and I did, 6 or 7 kermesses in the space of 2 weeks. And for anyone who doesn't know, kermesses are races that anyone can do, but a lot of professional riders would do them as practice for maybe bigger races, but they're always a really, really good level. And I guess anyone who wants to get international experience, it's just a really good way of kind of bringing you up a level. And it's really technical because it's a lot of cobbles and turns and you're doing laps. And kermesse actually means festival in Flemish. So it's these bike races that are hosted around a festival. So there's always a really good atmosphere there, and they'd have a juniors race, a women's race, a men's race. Yeah, so and that's a way you can get sort of spotted if you like to. So bigger teams might look at these races, and if they think that you have potential, they will ask you to be on their team, which is what happened to me. IBCT picked me up and asked me to join their team for 2022. And they had some Irish girls on the team already. And it was actually a team that was set up by an Irish guy called Mark and a Belgian director called Ken. And they merged to actually help Irish riders and Belgian riders make that step up. which unfortunately we don't have anymore. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got into the European scene.
Wow.
Sorry, that's so much.
Yeah. It's so insightful to know that, like, if there's somebody listening to the podcast who has somebody who's aspiring to be a professional cyclist and thinks, God, maybe, you know, a move to Belgium or even to Spain to know about the opportunity, like 100 girls turning up to a local race, that is unheard of in Ireland.
Yeah.
So I suppose it just provides the opportunity to see and to feel and to embrace what life might be like if you are planning on taking up cycling full time.
Yeah, exactly. It really gives you a good indication of what the level is like, because those races are hard, and I really like the way anyone can join them. And also they're so frequent that's what I like about cycling, is that actually we race so much that if you have a bad race, then there's a race a few days later. You can just learn from it, put it behind you, and, you know, go again to the next race. And that's what the kermesses are like. And eventually you find different patterns, and you notice, oh, how are these people winning the race, and what are they doing differently to everyone else? And you start to follow riders and get to know the girls. And because that's a lot about cycling as well. It's like, yeah, it's a lot of it is predicting moves. It's a great place to get that experience.
And just listening to you now, Fiona, it sounds like you've really not only embraced the cycling and the fitness element, but actually the tactics bit is the bit that kind of excites you as well. And figuring out, you know, how you actually go to make the break from the bunch or the peloton and take a win. That the tactics are just so important. And split-second decisions could be the difference between crossing the finish line or it being game over.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm constantly learning. I feel like sometimes you think you have something dialed, and then something else happens, and you get thrown into the deep end again. So, but it is a lot about tactics and having a plan for each race, but knowing that plan can change as well. With my team, we always come in with a plan, but we know that things will change on the road, and then you have to trust your instincts then to make your decisions. Yeah.
And you mentioned there as well that you would race quite frequently. So when we think about racing, I mean, you might do like an Olympic distance triathlon on Saturday, and then you might wait another week or two to do another race. But it sounds like you're racing, you know, every couple of days. So how do you recover from that? How do you, you know, if you're going full gas to the finish line in a race and you do well, and then you want to go race again in 3 days' time, how do you get your body to just be at the point where it's always race ready?
Yeah, that's hard. And sometimes I think I'm relatively new still in the sport, and I'm still trying to find that sweet spot of training enough and racing enough, but then recovering enough to then be fresh again for the next period of racing. But I think if you look at your training plans, a lot of people go in 4-week blocks where you'd have your 3-week build and then your 1 week off. And obviously in cycling during the season, you can't do it like that. So you really have to just know your own limits. And that comes, I think, with experience, and know when to back off and know when you can push harder as well. I always make sure, I don't know, once a week that I have half a day of pure recovery, of just even a full day of like no training, not even thinking about cycling or anything like that, just pure recovery. And yeah, because I guess to be able to race hard, you need to recover harder. So yeah, sorry, that probably doesn't answer specifically your question, but the team helps a lot too. Your nutrition and sleep is probably like the two most important things. There's no secret really. Sleep is definitely just like the biggest drug. Yeah, and eating properly. Yeah.
It is, so eating properly as well. And is it all consuming, Fiona? You know, the way you mentioned there, you might take a half day off or you might take a full day and not think about cycling. I can't imagine if you're in your sport, insofar as how much you're in the sport, that you ever really switch off from cycling. It must be really hard to not be thinking about on your recovery day going, God, I have this really hard session to do tomorrow, or, you know, I need to get my food ready today for tomorrow or for the next day, or there's a race on Saturday. So even on a recovery day, I imagine that it's quite hard to switch off.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I think it's only this year that I've really been able to do that, because at the end of the day, you're not going to race well if you've been stressed before the race, or, you know, if you've had a lot on your mind and stuff. And I think also the more you race, the more you get into a routine and things just become second nature. Yeah, for anyone listening, I guess anyone that's starting off into the, let's say, professional side of cycling or the more intense side, they say it takes 2 years to kind of find your ground. And so those 2 years are going to be really hard in terms of finding what nutrition works for you, or like injuries also are more inclined to happen in those first 2 years and things like that. So sometimes you just have to make the mistakes. Like you have to learn, I guess. And yeah, and I mean, I've always been working since I started cycling. So that was always a switch off for me, because there was people that, I was accountable to, and my work was always a priority up until maybe last year. And so that forced me to switch off, and that really helped me find a balance as well.
You mentioned balance there when you are working and riding, and we see it quite a lot with the professional triathletes as well. We see, they've got their pro license, but they're still actually working part-time and sometimes even full-time. So trying to get that balance right of having a life outside of your full-time professional career, or two careers, even if they're on the go together. How do you find that balance? How do you find the time for just Fiona, the person, as opposed to Fiona, the biomedical engineer, or Fiona, the professional cyclist?
I think I've never trained crazy hours. I think that's really important. Is I've been really lucky to have coaches through the years that have focused more on quality as opposed to quantity. So at the end of the day, if you balance your time right, or organize your timing right, you can always find spare time, and your health and your happiness is more important than any sport, or so like I think the most important thing for me is to spend time with my family, my boyfriend, and my friends. Like, as in, I couldn't do anything, like I couldn't cycle without them, basically, because they're my biggest support, and when I'm with them I can really relax and enjoy myself. And I always prioritize seeing my family. I'd prefer to take a flight when I maybe should be resting in Spain. I prefer to go home and take a flight home and see my family than to just rest for a week, in a sunny country or something.
Whereas most of the rest of us in Ireland at the moment are looking out of the weather going, oh my God, I'd love a week in Spain.
Yeah. Well, if they came out to Spain, then it would be the perfect scenario. I just think that for me, that is recovery, is just spending time with, my family.
Now that we're talking about relaxing and away from cycling, what do you do outside of cycling to relax? What is your go-to recovery?
Yeah, I like to do lots of different things. I like to read. I also, I'll watch Netflix. I bought a saxophone like 2 years ago. I had high hopes to try and teach myself the saxophone. I think I annoyed my housemates more than anything else. But yeah, to be honest, I just try and do different things and just get my mind away from it. I also probably shouldn't, but I do run sometimes and go for hikes, and I just try and do different things to kind of stimulate my head in a different way.
The other part of your brain that isn't all
exactly.
So you mentioned that you like to read and you also watch Netflix. So what book are you reading at the moment, and what are you watching on Netflix?
I'm reading a book called Good for a Girl. It's about running in a man's world. It's by Lauren Fleshman. I only just started it, but it's really interesting. I think I've never been in sort of the running community in Ireland so much, but yeah, it sounds like in America, it's obviously like a huge part of their, like, in university culture. And it's just interesting to see their pathway and the struggles that she went through too, as well as like an athlete and stuff. And yeah, she's obviously a huge inspiration to a lot of girls, and that's interesting. And then Netflix, I'm watching Friends from College. And it's very funny. It's just about 6 friends post-college and just all their drama in their life. It's very funny.
And were you on the Bridgerton train, were you?
No, I actually wasn't. Yeah, I'll have to get onto that train. I'm afraid, though. I think once I get onto it, I'll just be sucked in. So
you might need 3 days recovery to binge watch.
Yeah. I have to input it into my training peaks.
Absolutely. Tell the coaches, Bridgerton, Netflix, has to be done. And Fiona, when you were in school and you were really young, you mentioned you started playing sports when you were around 8 years of age. And you've also mentioned that you love the tactical side of things. You're also an engineer. So in school, were you sporty or nerdy, or were you a little bit of both? If PE came up, was it, oh yes, PE, yes? Or was it like, oh my God, I'm not doing PE, I hate PE?
Yeah, it was definitely, I think it was just like a mix. I loved both sports and school, but I think I was more of a girly girl as well. I definitely loved hanging around with my friends, and like I loved teenage discos when we were younger. Like we had the Energizer actually organized by my football club. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but it was, I don't know if they still have it, but yeah, that was really fun. Like when you're like 14, 15. So I think I was a bit of a mix. Yeah. School, I loved like certain subjects, but then the subjects that I didn't like, I really didn't like Irish or English. And so subjects like that, sometimes I just wouldn't study. The subjects that I liked, I'd go, hardcore studying. So I was a bit picky. Yeah.
And did you study French in school, or was it just at home that you got all the French with your French heritage?
It was all at home, but actually my mom said me and my sisters, that we should all do Leaving Cert French just to get extra points. But I ended up doing better in Spanish than French, so I don't even think my French counted for my points. But yeah, it was actually, the written exam was a disaster because I can't actually write French. I can just speak it and understand it fluently, but I have difficulty with the grammar and stuff. So I had great fun in the oral exam with the examiner. We just had a normal chat and stuff, but yeah, the written exam was a bit of a disaster. Yeah.
And I presume as an international professional rider now, your French more so than your Spanish, but your French definitely must come in handy, you know, when you're in Belgium, when you're in France, when you're in Spain, wherever it is that you have that international language. And when we're young and we're doing our exams, we never really think that we'll use our language. I was in Switzerland a few weeks ago and I did German to my leaving cert. And it's funny how the words came back and I was like, I'll never need German again. And here I am standing in Switzerland and your man is talking German. I'm like, oh, I understood that. I can answer that question in German and English.
Yeah, that must have felt good, actually. You must have been like texting your Leaving Cert like teacher, being like, thank you. Yeah.
Funny enough, Fiona, we were in Cork a few weeks ago and my next door neighbour across the road was a German teacher and we met her and I was telling her how the couple of weeks previous, how she'd have been so proud of me because the grinds she gave me for my exams came in handy for the German that I needed for my job 30 years later. So
that's class.
So if you're listening out and you're young and you're in college or you're in school, get your languages down.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that, because it's funny because actually I met my Spanish teacher only 2 weeks ago. I said the exact same thing to her because I was on a Spanish team last year, and like you say, your Leaving Cert Spanish comes out and it's so useful. And yeah, so actually my Spanish has helped me nearly more than my French, just because obviously I've been living here in Spain and I was actually on 2 Spanish teams, like a club team and then a continental team. And yeah, it was really useful there to, like, when you're applying to a team, it's always useful if you can speak the native language of the director. And yeah, in bike races, obviously you have the radio communication as well when you're actually racing. And if you don't understand your director, then yeah, you're at kind of a disadvantage, or you could be doing something totally different to what he says. So yeah, it's definitely helped me.
You mentioned about applying to a race team. Like, how does that work? Did you apply to be on a race team, or is it like at those races where you might get spotted or there might be a scout?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's always hard to find a cycling team. Like, there's different ways. I think I sort of had to learn as I went along, because there's no guidebook on how to get onto a cycling team. But the first time, obviously when I went to Belgium, and the director approached me and said, do you want to be on our team? And I actually had kind of known about that team before because I knew other Irish girls that were on the team. So kind of there was a connection already made there.
Was that the team with Mia and Alice and
Megan and Lara? Yeah. IBCT. Yeah, that was, so like there was obviously an influence there from Ireland, which is really helpful. And for my Spanish team, actually my very first club team in Spain, I went into a shop here to get my bike fixed, and I got talking to one of the owners whose wife had been on a club team, and she had actually given me the number of the director. So I called him up in Spanish, and you kind of have to like sell yourself a bit, to be like, hello, I'm from Ireland, I'm a sprinter, you know. And this is before I'd only done 2 cycling races at this point. And yeah, you just like, he was like, oh, come out and come to our service course. And I was like, okay. And he was like, yeah, our service course is like based out it was in Sant Feliu, which is about an hour from Girona. And I was like, okay. And then I realized I have no way of getting there. How do I do this? So I eventually found a bus that was like 3 hours to do an hour drive. But anyways, I got there and he collected me, and we went to like the back of a bakery, and inside there was a load of kit. So cycling clothes. And he said, okay, we'll get you a kit sorted. And I was absolutely beaming, like, this is my first time, you know, getting a proper kit from a team, and it's really exciting. So yeah, and I came home and he was like, oh, we need to do a photo shoot to present you to the team and everything. And it's funny because, like, yes, they're small, they're like a really, really small club team, but they nearly operate the same way as like some of the bigger teams. And there's always, what would you say, like an etiquette, I guess, for each team. And there's always like, you get your kit and there's the presentation of kits. And I've just found that like even whatever team you're on, there's always like that kind of part of it, you know? So yeah, so that's how I got onto that club team. And then for my Spanish team, Imogen Cotter gave me the number of the Spanish director, and same thing, I called him up, and that was the team that I got to do the Vuelta España with. And yeah, we got some really cool opportunities with that team, because a lot of the Spanish continental teams would get invited to the big races around Spain. So I also got to do Itzulia, which is in the Basque Country. And yeah, and then same with Cynisca. It was a mutual friend that put me in touch. So otherwise, I find it's very hard to get the numbers of teams and directors. And eventually, I think when you start to step it up, it's always good to have an agent, and then the agent helps you secure a team. Yeah.
And I presume as well, even though it's probably a nice community of women and it's very supportive, at least I hope it is, everyone's protective of their position in a team. So to have, here's this young one from Ireland coming in now trying to take my spot, and she's ringing up the director, I imagine there's a little bit of protection over everybody's position within a team. And when a new rider is kind of making shapes, that people can be kind of a little bit like, oh, what's going on here now? Or am I completely off the wall with it?
No, I actually think with the Irish riders, like there's so few of us that I think we're supportive of each other. And actually, the more Irish girls racing abroad, the better for Ireland, because if we have more Irish girls racing abroad and who get good results, then more spots open up for European championships and world championships. So like, I think we all like in a way support each other. At the end of the day, we're all kind of doing similar things. Like, we have similar lives. So like, we sort of root for each other. Well, I do anyways. And that's why I loved coming home for nationals, because you get to see everyone and catch up a bit. And yeah, it's always like really like a really nice positive atmosphere.
And you also became the first Irish woman to finish a Grand Tour.
Yeah, that was the Vuelta España. Yeah, that was last year. I remember my coach saying to me, like, after you do a tour, you'll be like a different rider. And I didn't really know what he meant, but it's like, it was the first time I did so many days in a row of cycling. And yeah, you just pick it up so quickly. You just get into this kind of zone for the whole week, and you come out of it then just kind of like a crash lesson of cycling, like all in a week.
Without a crash, obviously.
Without a crash. Well,
a crash course,
there was maybe a lot of crashes. Crash course, that's what I meant. Yeah.
And do you ever get nervous, Fiona, about going into a race and maybe the potential to have a crash? Or do you just have to put that to the side of your head, because you need to just let the adrenaline go and just let your head rule everything else, put the hammer down when it needs to be going, take the risks when they need to happen? If you were thinking about crashing, you'd never get anywhere.
Yeah, personally, I don't think I get nervous before races for that. I'd get more nervous for climbs and things like that. I think everyone has their strengths and their weaknesses. And for me, I feel quite comfortable in the bunch, so I don't get afraid of crashes. But that being said, when you have had a crash, normally the races after that, it's very common to feel a bit more nervous. And especially, for example, I crashed a few weeks ago, nearly 2 months ago, in Italy on a descent on stage 2, I think, of that Giro Emilia Mediterraneo. Yeah. So I crashed on the second stage, and it was on a descent. And a few weeks after that, then in training, I just felt quite cautious on the descents, especially if there was like corners, and you kind of have to relearn again that confidence. So it's quite normal to feel nervous like at certain times of the year. Yeah. What
do you do then to try and mitigate against the nerves, or do you just let the nerves come in and just go with the flow?
Yeah, you just you kind of have to go through it in your head. Like, it's quite mental more than anything. You just have to tell yourself that you are a good descender, and you've done this before. And then it's just bit by bit with every training ride, you just gain your confidence. And sometimes what I do is I just stop thinking about it and just nearly let the bike go. And it, like, because I've been doing it for a while, like you do naturally like descend. So yeah, sometimes you just have to shut off your head, shut off your thoughts. Yeah.
And I probably should have asked this earlier in the conversation, but at what point did you decide that professional cycling was the career that you really, really wanted to follow?
I think there wasn't like one moment where I was like, oh, I definitely want to do this. I think it was actually just like a natural progression. I just kept enjoying myself. And I always said, like, the day I don't enjoy myself, I will stop and I will be absolutely fine with that. But I just like, I love racing and I just want as many opportunities that I can to race, because when you're racing, I don't know, it's just like you don't think about anything else. There's this really nice focused zone that you get into, and you have this competitiveness that I think a lot of us have kind of naturally. And yeah, it's just such an experience. Sometimes I'm in the bunch and I'm just like, oh my God, this is wild. Like 60 of us girls or 100 girls, and we're all going like 60k an hour down this descent, like, and we're all able to do it like in cohesion. So it just, yeah, I really love it. And I think it's just been like naturally, I've just like enjoyed it more and more. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that you're still doing a little bit of running. So do you think, will you come back to triathlon eventually, maybe down the line? You're still only really young. You're like 20, is it 28 years of age? So you're still very young, still got a massive career ahead of you. But is triathlon something that might, I know you used to see swim quite a lot during COVID. You were a triathlete before. Do you think, is that something that you might come back to, or are you just going to be a purebred cyclist from now on?
I don't know. Like, I wouldn't say no to it. Although I think if I started doing Ironman, my boyfriend would be like, "Oh my God, I need you at home." But no, I think there were certain parts of triathlon that I loved. Like, I loved like going to Salt Hill and doing the sea swims every week. They were so fun after work, and no matter what, like the day, like most of the time, everyone always went out. So I do miss those. And the thing is, I like running, but I don't think I could very quickly, or not anytime soon, would I be able to go back to like structured running again, because yeah, like running is hard. But yeah, we'll see. I don't know. But I think triathlon definitely taught me a lot about like organization and balancing time. And there's such a nice community in Ireland. Like, even doing those it was it in Connemara. What's the name? I did that open water swim.
Gale Force, was it?
I think it was Gale Force. Yeah, like it was freezing cold, but there were so many people there, and you just like, you're kind of doing your own challenge and stuff. And yeah, like there's a lot of parts of triathlon that I do miss for sure. Yeah.
And you mentioned Imogen Cotter earlier, and she has come back to triathlon, raced a few weeks ago, and now she's going to Ironman 70.3 Kashkite in October. So she has definitely taken to triathlon again like a duck to water. In terms of staying, I suppose, mentally strong, there has to be some element of your training psychologically, or is there, that keeps you mentally strong, so that when you do have a race that doesn't go your way, or when you crash or get injured, that you're able to pick yourself back up and not reflect too much on the negative side, but actually always kind of, I suppose, look forward to the opportunity that's going to arise in the next race?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head in that when you have something to look forward to, then it's a lot easier to kind of get over an injury or sickness. Or as soon as you start seeing improvements in something, I'm sure you relate to this, but a lot of athletes, when they get injured, instead of focusing on their training program, they start to focus on their recovery. And that becomes kind of a source of satisfaction every day, seeing themselves recover. And at the end of the day, all we have is the present moment, and we can only control, or not control, but we can only deal with what we have right now. So there's no point obsessing too much about the past or too much in the future as well. I think as well, like actually racing has taught me to do this a lot, is to really focus on what's going on in the race right now and just ground yourself in that moment so that you can move forward to the next thing. So yeah, in racing, for example, that time when I crashed in Italy, it was only after 40k or something in the race. So I had to do another 60k. My elbow was completely open, and all I could do at that moment was get to the finish line. So luckily I was in a gruppetto with 10 other girls, and we just, rode to the finish, and I just focused on staying safe within that bunch and breathing as well. Breathing has definitely helped me a lot in dealing with different situations you come across, that's just to breathe and focus on that for a bit. Yeah.
And just to bring the adrenaline back down and to kind of
exactly.
be in the moment almost and be mindful about what you're doing. It's hard being a cyclist, as a professional athlete. But tell me, what's the hardest bit about being a professional athlete?
Definitely the logistics, I think. I think we mentioned earlier on about like how cycling can be sometimes like all consuming, but I think that's more around logistics on like, okay, how do you get to this place, and then how are you going to leave that place, and how many buses and trains and planes you're going to take. Luckily, like your team takes care of a lot of that, but then you have to think of your personal logistics, because like you need to have a bike like everywhere you go, so you need to think about like, okay, if I'm going to go visit my friends this week, I need to bring my bike. Can I go cycling, your nutrition? And so it's just, that's hard, and getting that right, it's hard. But I think that's sometimes when I just give myself a little bit of leeway. Like if I don't have the perfect training setup, you just make do with what you have. So, but I think I find that the hardest.
You almost need a degree in operational logistics between flights and transport, fuel, nutrition, clothing, gear, everything. But that's actually one of the things I think a lot of us love about endurance sport, and in particular triathlon, is it is three sports, so it does require a lot of organization. But then when it comes to the professional side of things, it's just a whole different ball game. I want to come back and talk a little bit about what it was like racing on the roads around Limerick for the national champs. And you talked about being in the moment. How did you stay in the moment for your two incredible races in Limerick when it was on home turf, home support? I'm sure your family and your boyfriend and your friends and everything were out on the roads cheering you on, and you were the local rider as well. So what was that like? Was it absolutely immense?
Yeah, it was definitely really special. For the time trial, I reconned the course quite a bit with a couple of guys from the club and with my dad as well. And actually that was a huge advantage because it was quite a technical course. There was a lot of descents and turns, and doing that over and over and over really gave me the confidence to bring speed into every junction and descent. And I knew the second half of the time trial course would be more uphill. So I really tried to use the first half, like the descents, to my advantage. And then I knew for the second part, it would just be a case of suffering and to just go as hard as I could. And funny thing with time trials is you don't know you've won until you kind of hear the results afterwards. And so my mom actually flew back. She was in France and she flew back for the week to see me. So, and my sister and her boyfriend were there, and then Owen, my boyfriend, came as well. So everyone was there, and well, except my little sister, but she was there from afar. So to have them all there as well when I won was really special. And I think, like I said it, I think in my interview, but a lot of cycling is a combination of so much things. But one of the most important things is your support network. And like I was saying earlier on about how to get onto teams, that's all little connections and people that are believing in you and people that want to see you kind of chase your dreams, I guess. And I felt like winning the time trial and then the road race, I was kind of giving back to them, and then it was just to do it in Limerick as well was, really, really special.
And it also kind of stamps to support your own self-belief as well, that yes, you do deserve to be where you are, racing with a professional team. You do deserve to be a professional cyclist, living the dream in what you want to do, and that you're kind of rubber stamping it a little bit by becoming a national champion. Is there that kind of a sense of it as well? Because I imagine, cycling is such an individual sport. Even though you're on a team, it's quite individual and there's a lot of support around it. But actually doing it for yourself and having the self-belief to know that you can be a champion must be hugely important as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because a lot of performance is confidence. And like we were talking earlier on about, like, or positive pressure. And I think for me, if you going into a race and if I'm confident and I feel positive, I'm more guaranteed an outcome than if I was going in with sort of a negative pressure or like a lack of self-confidence. I definitely think this hopefully will drive me on for the rest of the year.
You've had lots of highlights, but what would you say is the highlight of your cycling career to date?
I actually think when I won the Kermesse back in 2022 in Belgium, I won a Kermesse in Racine, which is, I think, beside Antwerp. And one of my teammates, Megan, was there and she really helped me as well in the race. That was really class because we really worked as a team that day, and it was my first international win, and that gave me a huge sense of self-confidence there as well, because they're hard races to win because they're quite technical and so much can happen. So when I did, that was a really fun day, and it was like a summer's day as well, and like we were just, honestly, that was just pure fun that day. So one of my highlights.
Yeah, well, definitely one of your highlights. And I suppose as well, you have mentioned in the past that you would love to ride in the Tour de France or indeed to make it to the Olympics. So what would it mean to you to actually get to the Tour de France or to make it to the Olympics?
I mean, the Tour de France, I think, is kind of the pinnacle in cycling. I think the Olympics, not so much. I think I would love to ride the Tour de France because it's just an amazing race. You get to travel all around France, and it's a hard race. Everyone tries to peak for that race. So it would mean a lot to me as well, because obviously half my family is French. So like a lot of my French family are like, when are you doing the Tour de France? And
no
so
pressure,
for me,
Fiona.
yeah. So for me to finally say I'm doing it this year would be, yeah, really cool. And I know they'd be out to support me. And then, yeah, the Olympics is also like really special. And I think to represent Ireland at the event, I think there's such a caliber of athletes there. Yeah, it's also a really special event. But yeah, it's also like one day, you know, and I think sometimes what's nearly more important is how your year looks like and how your team is and kind of the day to day, you know. Like I would never have thought that I'd even be in a position to go to Olympics when I was younger. I think it would only hit me once I'm actually there. So I'm yet to find out what it would mean to me, I guess.
Yeah. And I suppose, speaking of a young girl, you know, if you think back, what we say, you're 28. So think back to 12-year-old Fiona when she's in school, maybe starting secondary school, and somebody says to you, oh, you're going to be a professional athlete. You know, what would you say to yourself back then now, looking back at the career that you've had?
I don't know. I probably would have said no, like, because I think I wanted to be an astronaut for a while, or like, you know, I just to be like, no, I don't want to be that. But I think one of the things as well that I've realized as I'm in the sport more is as a kid, I don't think you even know really what a professional athlete does, or I had never really come across like girl professional cyclists until like that day in nationals, and then until I got here. So I think being exposed to that as a kid is important, because then they have a bigger variety of like, or bigger understanding of what is out there, or what could they do. But yeah, but I also think like life just brings you in different directions as well. So sometimes you just have to go with the flow and see what presents itself as well. Yeah.
And I think as well, when we look back, you know, 20 years ago, we didn't have the caliber and number of female athletes that we have, not just in cycling, but across sport generally, that are on the world stage, that are Irish athletes can, and young girls can look up to and say, look at this. You know, it used to be Sonia O'Sullivan, now it's Sonia O'Sullivan's daughter in athletics. So, you know, and that's just to mention one, and I'm not going to mention any more, but Sonia is the obvious one that we all, especially in my generation, grew up with. And now we see her daughter is inspiring even the likes of me. So as those younger kids coming through, we're seeing those role models on a world stage. Even last weekend at the national championships, they were just amazing to see the support that they were getting based on, you know, the performances that they've been putting in over the past few years, but particularly with the European Championships that happened recently in Rome. And it just elevated everything and everybody. And now there's like a real buzz around not just our athletes generally, but particularly some of our female athletes, which is really special, I think. And I really hope that it offers the opportunity for girls particularly that are now at that young teenage age, that are kind of going, gosh, yeah, you know, maybe I could do something like this in the future, or maybe being an athlete is something that they might never have considered, but then they look back and go, wow, yeah, Fiona Mangan was my inspiration back in the day when I was in secondary school or in school and stuff. And I think that's hugely important. And the profile that you're giving to the sport of cycling in Ireland is fantastic. So congratulations on everything that you've achieved so far.
Thanks,
and have yet to achieve. And we might get you jumping off the diving board in Blackrock at some point when you get the big Galway. So speaking of influence, and we're going to finish, I think, on this question, but who has been the biggest influence in your sporting career?
I think it's a collection of people. You can sort of be inspired of different bits from different people, but a particular moment I do remember is when I was in triathlon, is reading Chrissy Wellington's book. I thought that book was just so good, and actually I've spoken to a number of other girls who have also read that book and really enjoyed it. And because it really gives her whole life story, and she goes into so much detail, and you start to relate to it, and you start to relate to some of her kind of thinking patterns and approaches to life and things like that. But yeah, I think I get inspired by anyone who's just like really passionate with what they do and kind of bring that into different situations or conversations and things, because passionate people, I think, work hard and they actually just bring up society. Doesn't matter what they're doing. I think I just really like passionate people, and yeah, you get inspired by so many different people that you meet.
That's a great answer. So it's not the big sporting stars, it's the everyday heroes that we meet on the street.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, Fiona, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's been a pleasure
Thanks,
chatting to
Joanne.
you. I really do hope you make it back to Salt Hill at some point, and the very best of luck with the rest of your season. I'm sure we'd never know where you might end up. I'm sure we'll see you on the road along the way, but congratulations again on a super season so far, and the very best of luck for the rest of 2024.
Thanks, Joanne. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions by emailing me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. If you would like to hear more great episodes of the podcast, be sure to check them out on our website or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow all of our activities and podcasts on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram. If you have any feedback or indeed guest suggestions, please email me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, thanks for listening. Stay safe, keep smiling, and remember to look for fun and adventure in every day.